Today, I'll explain to you why your time would be much better spent learning about Bitcoin than going to Harvard and earning a business degree. Today, I'm going to be going over an article by Jesse Myers, aka Croesus, where he talks about the value of a Harvard business degree and then compares that to investing in Bitcoin. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out and invest in Bitcoin. What I am suggesting you do, however, is subscribe, like, so that we can give you more of this kind of content and that you can educate yourself about Bitcoin and learn exactly why this is such a revolutionary technology. Now, before I go any further, I want you to know something. I personally know somebody, pretty well too, that didn't go to any public school. This person grew up something like 20 miles outside of any city, didn't have any real formal education from what I understand, and is doing just fine these days. So as I go through some of these different statistics and different facts, keep this in mind, that you don't have to do any of these things that the regular system tells you that you need to do. In 2012, Harvard's illustrious MBA program did something unusual. For the 25th reunion of the class of 1986, they sent out a survey that asked intimate questions about these Harvard Business School grads' lives and careers, and then they published the results. As far as I can tell, they never published anything like this again. The median annual earnings for these high-powered executives was $350,000. More revealing, however, was what the survey indicated about the net worths of these 50-year-old Harvard grads. In 2011, the median net worth for the HBS class of 1986 was $6 million. Of course, adjusted for asset price inflation, that would mean something like $10 million today. It is also worth underlining that this would have been the midpoint in the set reported net worth, and presumably the average would have been much higher as a result of some very high earners at the top end of the distribution. When I first came across this number, it shocked me. It frankly feels low. This is Harvard Business School we're talking about, and this is the cohort of HBS grads who went out into the world at the tail end of the 80s and the heyday of opportunity for corporate executives to deliver value through cost-cutting, offshoring, M&A, and financial engineering. They would have been perfectly positioned to take leadership positions in newfangled internet companies in the 90s and would have been active participants in the 2000s housing boom. Our culture glorifies the Harvard MBA today because of the massive success of this era of Reagan Republicans who were trained in the latest techniques of cutting-edge managerial science and whipped into the zealous religion of shareholder profits above all else before being unleashed upon the world. These grads are why Harvard Business School is known as the West Point of capitalism. Now, the reason I'm talking about Harvard and education and comparing this to Bitcoin is because people will tell you what you should think. They will tell you, this is the way to do business. This is the way to do X. This is the way to do cooking. This is the way to do health. This is the way to do whatever. They have their set in stone ideas, and you go to Harvard, you go to Yale, you go to wherever to learn those ideas. And for a long time, that had been a pretty good way to do things because that was where they had the information to do those things. But that is no longer the case. Now we live in a world of the internet, and on the internet, you can learn almost anything that you could possibly want with a few clicks. You can go to YouTube and learn cooking to carpentry to mechanic work for your car to how to rebuild a house. It doesn't really matter. There are very few limits when it comes to learning now. I say all this because you don't have to follow the prescribed courses, the prescribed way of doing things that has been set in stone for so long. Let's go from Harvard, the top, the absolute elite of the elite, or what is perceived as such, and look at everybody else. The education system in the United States of America is often compared to those in other countries, and there are several fast facts that highlight some of the differences. In terms of spending, the United States spends more on education per student than many other developed countries, including Japan, Germany, and France. However, the outcomes for American students in terms of test scores and graduation rates are often lower than in those countries like Finland, South Korea, and Canada. One potential explanation for this discrepancy is the emphasis on standardized testing in the United States, which can lead to a focus on test preparation rather than critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Right now, we have generation after generation after generation going to school to be taught that this is a pen, and what you do with a pen is you write things or you draw things, but that's really all you do with a pen. When instead, we should be asking children, what can you do with a pen? Can you write with it? Absolutely. Can you draw with it? Absolutely. Can you use it to brace a door if you need? Absolutely. There are so many more things that you can do with a pen beyond writing and drawing, but we're not teaching children how to think that way. And if you don't think that they're learning how to think about a pen, then how in the world would they be learning how to think about the monetary system, one of the most complicated aspects of our lives? From Rebel Educator on Twitter, we have this. During the Revolutionary Era, America didn't have a Department of Education or a central education system, and yet literacy rates in the colonies and early America were comparable to today's. The idea that we need an authority to force us to become educated is ridiculous. If you had a son and he had no idea how to read, would you just be fine with that? Would you sit around twiddling your thumbs going, boy, I sure need a government official to come in and tell me to teach little Timmy how to read. If they don't come and tell me to do it, then I guess you're never going to learn how to read, and this is a No, of course not. You'd sit him down in front of books and you'd show him how to read, how to sound words out, how to sound letters out. You would do it yourself. Homeschooling is legal in all 50 states, but there are some requirements you have to meet. No, you don't. Parents are required to choose or create an educational curriculum that meets certain educational standards set forth by the state, as long as those standards are met. However, parents have more educational liberty with homeschooling than with public schools. Students may have more opportunities to choose what they learn with homeschooling, and they can learn at their own pace without having to keep up with more advanced students. At the outset of this, I told you about somebody that I knew that didn't have any sort of formal education. They didn't have any sort of standardized testing, and the education that they got from their mother was things like baking bread, and let's learn how to cut this piece of lumber, and we got to take a ½ inch off of it because we're building a shelf or something, and so we got to go, okay, it's 6.5 inches, but we got to take a ½ inch off, so it's 6 inches. Like, they learned actual practical things. There was no tests from the state that they were given. There was nothing that they had to do. And you might ask, well, how do they get anywhere in life? I'll reveal that at the end of where they're at in life right now. Back to Rebel Educator on Twitter. Teach your kids mental models. First, principles. Sailor is always talking about that. Second, order thinking. Inversion. The 80-20 principle. That's the Pareto principle. Teach them how to use tools to break down ideas and help them think more clearly. And this right here might be one of the biggest reasons to consider homeschooling above anything else. This fact right here. If you send your kids to school, you're losing out on 16,000 of their precious childhood hours and letting someone else spend 16,000 hours shaping them, not you. Is that really a trade worth making? If your children are spending 16,000 hours over there, out of sight, out of mind, learning from some other person that you maybe have met a couple times at best and you certainly don't know super well, and you have spent most of your adult life, or however much life that you've spent, trying to figure out how the world works, and you've probably learned some really interesting things, don't you want to share that with this person that you've brought into the world? If Bitcoin becomes a $200 trillion asset, each of the 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist will grow to be worth 10 million apiece, the same value as the median net worth of a Harvard MBA from the class of '86. The best of the boomers achieved 10 million in worth through leveraging an unprecedented era of equities and real estate price appreciation. The best of the millennials and zoomers may achieve the same wealth simply by plucking the low-hanging fruit of accumulating Bitcoin before the rest of the world has caught on. And he finishes by saying, and the cleverest of the boomers will realize they can ride this wave too. I've mentioned somebody a couple times now that didn't go to public school. He didn't do the things that you were supposed to do. He didn't take any of those standardized tests. He didn't even graduate high school. And here he is sitting in front of you talking to you about Bitcoin. A year ago, I didn't know all that much about Bitcoin. And now I'm helping other people learn about this incredible innovation. So here I am, living proof that you don't have to do anything that the state tells you to do. My mom didn't teach me the way that the state said she had to. We didn't do any of that nonsense. And if I'm proof of that when it comes to living, here I am, I'm doing just fine, then maybe the same is true of Bitcoin. Maybe the state doesn't know what it's talking about, and maybe you should learn how to think, not what to think.